Hi, it's Robert Mendelson, Fractional CMO here in beautiful Montreal, welcoming you to another episode of the Fractional Pros Canada podcast. We're part of Fractional Pros Canada, the home for Canada's fractional community, and you can find us on Facebook. We bring you conversations about everything fractional that matters for fractional executives and businesses from coast to coast. Think of this as your go-to spot for real talk, practical wisdom, and strategies you can actually use, all without the corporate fluff and with plenty of Canadian content. Whether you're a fractional pro or a business in our great country of Canada and beyond, this conversation is for you. Grab your espresso and let's dive in. And joining me today are Darren Legault and Joe Randle, both fractional sales C-suite leaders with decades of experience between the two of you as full-timers in those positions. Welcome to the Fractional Pros Canada podcast.
Thank you, Robert.
Thanks, Robert. Nice to be here.
All right, great. Well, I've got my espresso. We're all set to go. So let's jump into it. Darren, Joe, for those who might not be familiar, give us a kind of a high level of how fractional sales leaders fit into the fractional picture of bringing value to businesses.
Well, I guess I'll go first. Again, my name is Darren Legault. I'm a fractional VP of sales with Sales Acceleration. And from my perspective, a fractional sales leader, CRO, works with businesses on a part-time basis, but actually is a little bit different than the consultant. We actually really go in and dig deep and work with our clients to figure out what the issues are with regards to some of their sales issues. And, I look at myself as somebody who diagnoses what the issues are. Typically it's gaps within their sales process, or perhaps their sales team isn't getting the proper support or guidance that they're needing. And, I work with them on a part-time basis until, the business starts scaling up after a little while. And again, it all depends on the needs of the business, but that's what I do. I help business owners who are having trouble scaling their business, perhaps are experiencing a decline in their sales, and I work with them to put in a solid foundation, solid sales processes in place, and also lead their teams.
So I heard you use some medical terms. I heard you say diagnosis. So I think it's a great analogy. It's almost like going in and performing some very precise surgery to keep the body, or in this case, the business, running more efficiently. Joe, is that pretty much how you see it as well?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to look at it. And that's a great summary that Darren provided. Just for background on myself, my name's Joe Randle. I'm currently a fractional chief revenue officer. I bring about 20 years of commercial leadership experience to the table, working in a composite of small businesses, sort of sub 5 million, up to large, organizations in the enterprise space. I see the approach similar to what Darren described. Really, my approach is to analyze that lead to cash continuum and stress test each component of that journey to look for where they may need assistance in optimization. Some businesses may struggle on the onset of generating leads, getting leads into the funnel. Others may struggle with closing, or may need talent development, or the customer journey may need to be improved. So to Darren's point, a lot of it is diagnosing and pinpointing those sort of pain points, if you will, stress testing where there may be optimization, and then implementing a plan accordingly.
It's interesting. So, Joe, you use the term CRO, Chief Revenue Officer. Darren, you describe yourself as a VP of Sales. And I think there's a little bit of confusion sometimes that people have trying to figure out, are those the same thing? Are they not? Let's try to clear that up. What do you guys think? Are they pretty much the same thing, different title, or are there actually distinct differences between the two roles?
Yeah.
Well, I think there are some differences. As a fractional VP of sales, I will actually help the owner with their sales teams, so lead their sales teams, because very often founders, owners, CEOs, they just don't have the time, right? They're They're stretched thin. They don't have time to provide coaching and support. So as a fractional VP of sales, very often I will lead their sales teams for the owner, provide one-on-one coaching support, and just hold them accountable for objectives that were agreed upon. And I think as a CRO, as a fractional CRO, and Joe, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you're probably looking at more overall strategy and that sort of thing. So, and I think it really depends on your strengths and your experiences as a sales leader. For myself, I have over 25 plus years building sales teams and putting processes in place, leading sales teams. So that really fits in my wheelhouse. I love doing it, and it's something that I think is very, very important. Sales teams need coaching, so I love doing it.
Yeah, I think it's nuanced, and that's a great definition and great distinction that Darren provided there. By definition, Chief Revenue Officer typically entails an element of marketing as well as customer success, so pre-post sales as well. But as Darren alluded to, a lot of it just comes down to the organization, right? I use the title CRO because it does encompass sort of that range of what I described, and that may be areas where organizations need assistance in addition to their sales growth, their development of talent, their pipeline generation. They may need assistance on the post-sale side of it, going back to that lead to cash continuum that I referred to, or on the marketing side, helping align with marketing, put some marketing plans in place to generate some of that demand and inbound lead flow.
So you mentioned the word pipeline, Joe. So let's talk about pipelines, sales pipelines. They say your sales are only as good as your sales pipeline. And that's true for any business, whether we're talking about our own fractional practices, smaller businesses, but if we don't have a good sales pipeline, then, our business is not going to be continuous. And also same applies if you're a multi-billion-dollar global company, global business, same story. So Darren, what are the most common gaps you see when you're asked to help companies when it comes to, helping them build a predictable sales pipeline?
Well, the mistake a lot of companies make is that they don't put the right people in the right spots. And I think it starts there, right? Maybe you have a sales rep who is a farmer, but he's in a hunter role. He or she's in a hunter role. So you want to make sure that your sales team is organized in a way that you have the right people in the right spots. You also want to make sure that your compensation plan rewards the right behaviors for your sales team, because if your compensation plan doesn't reward new customer acquisition, then your sales team is simply not going to do those activities, right? So there's a few things that you need to make sure that the reps have the tools and resources at their disposal. And you want to make sure that those activities are being done. You want to make sure the resources and tools are there, like a CRM, for example, to help them with the pipeline, like you mentioned, Robert. But there's a lot of different things that businesses can do to set them up for success. And those are just a few things that I mentioned right there. And just making sure that they're doing those activities on a daily basis, whether it's cold outreach, email, or just going old school, knocking on doors, depending on your business. Very, very important to do.
That's a great point, because I think a lot of sales reps, they love the thrill of the chase, which is give me a hot lead, let me go close the lead, versus, today you're going to sit on the phone, or you're going to go knock on doors, you're going to do cold calls. Less stimulating for most sales reps, I would think. Joe, what's your experience been? You've worked with some larger organizations. What are your thoughts on the biggest gaps and kind of blind spots when it comes to building those predictable sales pipelines?
Well, I think focus is primary, right? So as Darren alluded to as well, if you're a hunter, right? So having that sort of that steady pipeline being built, if you're going after new logo acquisition, if that's your core focus, having that pipeline built and staging it properly, having top of the funnel all the way down to your contracts being on the doorstep is critically important. I like to work with a 3x multiple, right? Your pipeline should at all times be 3x the size of your target. on a monthly or annualized basis. So volume is critically important. Velocity is critically important as well, right? So moving things through the funnel, through the staging, not allowing things to get stale and having that momentum. Sense of urgency when it comes down to a qualitative component is critically important. Even though maybe the first quarter, as we are in now, having that focus and that sense of urgency as though the year is coming to an end soon is important, right? As opposed to allowing, your pipeline to drag throughout the year, and then trying to put the pedal to the metal in the fourth quarter always is a recipe for missing a quota. So really ensuring your pipeline is big, it's more than sufficient, it's focused, it's precise, and you're staging it and moving through it as quickly as possible, culling out all the opportunities that are not going to close, replacing them with new ones. That's the formula that typically I would say for the new sales, net new logo side. On the farming side, not too dissimilar in terms of pipeline metrics. You want to keep that size up there, but it's obviously a little bit of a different art when you're managing existing business than you are focusing on new.
So interesting to give the metric 3x. So your pipeline should have 3x the number of actual customers that you close. Is that kind of a metric you've seen from your experience that kind of works in general for all businesses? Is that kind of that's always the goal to have in mind, is have 3 times as many leads as you do actual customers, clients?
Yeah, my experience is, some may say slightly more. I think a lot of it, Robert, comes down to your conversion rates, right? Your closing rates.
Sure.
A lot of that can really have an impact. But in terms of what I've seen across, B2B SaaS, technology, other areas of sales, 3x has been a pretty good sort of industry standard to look at. If you've got a high close rate, maybe it's 2x, but and then in other areas you may be looking at 4 or 5x. But 3x, generally speaking, is a good sort of barometer, if you will, and measurement.
Darren, would you concur from the businesses and the verticals you worked in? Is that 3x kind of work there as well?
Yeah, I think Joe is bang on. I mean, there are some subtle differences between industries and companies. Sales cycles, for example, if you have a really long sales cycle, maybe a little bit different than a industry that's got a shorter sales cycle. But yeah, 3 is typically what you see.
Interesting, Joe, you mentioned creating that sense of urgency. I listened to a podcast a few years ago. It was all about productivity, and they were saying that what they do is they work in their company. They have everybody work as if a year lasts 6 weeks, and
Yeah.
so it automatically shrinks timelines and creates an urgency. And they actually have like an office calendar that shows a year being just 6 weeks, and it just puts this extra pressure on everybody to be focused, get things done before year end. And they claimed, I mean, from what they said, that it made everybody more productive. And I don't know if that also meant they were working crazy hours or burning out after 6 weeks and taking 2-week recovery cruises or all inclusives down in the Bahamas or whatever. But an interesting way to create that sense of urgency. Are there any other ways that you've seen is kind of a healthy way to create a sense of urgency within the sales team?
In my experience, a lot of it comes down to cultural, Robert. Really just, establishing a winning culture in a sales organization is critically important. Most salespeople generally are competitive in a collaborative capacity. So creating that sort of winning culture and celebrating wins and really looking at where you can have repeatable success that can be spread within the peer group so other people can benefit from it, and that engenders that sort of collaborative culture and that winning culture that I alluded to. So that for me has been a very successful tenet of my leadership, and what I've seen being effective in organizations is really having that culture that breeds success and breeds winning, and that becomes infectious in a very positive way and helps drive that momentum to really give you that tailwind for that sense of urgency.
Nice. So let's talk a little bit about what are some good techniques to fill that sales pipeline. And one of them that comes to my mind is networking, especially as fractionals that we all are, networking is kind of crucial. I would say number one to building our own sales pipelines. So, have you guys found any kind of secret sauces to networking, to network effectively, efficiently, and ultimately create some, A relationships that end up giving you some kind of, referral business ultimately? That's ultimately what we all want from our networks. It's a give and take. We like to give, we like to take. That's what a healthy relationship is with when it comes to networking, referral partners. Any secrets to share as far as what makes for a great networking strategy?
Well, I don't know if I'd say they're secrets, because I think a lot of people are aware of the strategies. But what you said right there, Robert, is critically important. Having those partnership programs where you have referral networks within your other fractional community, I think is critically important. That's one of the most critical things you can do to really build up that funnel and get that pipeline going. As far as networking goes, my philosophy, which is not a secret, and I think shared among both you, Robert, and Darren, and many other people, is you need to embrace the reciprocal nature of networking and enter in with a mindset of giving more value than you may get in return. And I think if you embrace that ethos around networking, you're more positioned to be successful. From there, I think some of the core tenets are to be intentional, right? To have very concise, clear messaging, state your value, your differentiating factors, and really establish that meaningful first impression is a critical component of it. Be prepared, right? Always be prepared with who you're networking with. Do research in advance. Make sure you know what you may be able to bring to the table in terms of value. Think of some things that you could bring in terms of meaningful introductions prior to the conversation. That may change once you have that conversation, find out that there may be something different to offer, but be prepared and think some things through before you get into the situation. Like I said, reciprocate. That's critically important. Always think about what you can bring back to that network and how you can add value and demonstrate connections that you may be able to make. And then I think from there, really just be organized. Have a CRM, a spreadsheet, a calendar, whatever device you may use to keep yourself highly organized and on point is critical. And then lastly, I'd say just be prepared to refine and reflect. So always look back at those networking conversations, think, could I augment my messaging? Could I refine and tailor my approach? How can I be more effective with the contacts that I've introduced? Really just kind of continue to have that refinement approach, I think only makes it better. And each networking conversation just goes smoother thereafter, as long as you kind of possess that self-awareness, if you will, of critiquing and refining.
Nice. Iterate, constantly improve, and ultimately what goes around comes around. Darren, anything to add to that pretty exhaustive list?
No, I don't think so. I mean, Joe, did a great job there at explaining, what it is that you should do to be an effective networker. But the only thing that I guess I would add is, just make sure that you're following up with your network. I think the mistake a lot of us make is you have a good meeting with somebody and then you don't speak with them again, or it's a year after that you
Right.
that you follow up. So I make it a point, like Joe mentioned, making a point in your CRM or whatever you're using to follow up with people, and just when you're having those conversations, what can I do to help you is probably the best way to to get these relationships going, and making sure that you have a really good relationship, and whether or not any business comes from it, you just never know, right? You never know if it's going to be 6 months from now, a year from now. Something may happen. So I think it's very, very important that you just keep top of mind. I think peer groups is another important one, and Robert, you've done a great job with Fractional Pros Canada on Facebook. I think we're already at 200 members or something like that. So
Yep.
it's that's a great way to meet different people, and I'm still big on in-person events as well. I know I'm located in Ottawa, and there's probably 2 or 3 in-person events that I make sure I attend on a regular basis, because that personal connection that you can get in person is invaluable. So yeah, you just have to make sure that you follow up and speak with a lot of different folks, and you never know what can come out of it.
Yeah, I always like making food analogies because I'm a foodie. So
Yeah.
I like to think of a lead as, when you make a soup, right? At some point, you got to boil it up. Let's say chicken soup, you got to boil it up, get it nice and hot, and get all the flavors out.
Uh-huh.
But then, as you said, the key is to keep that lead warm. So if you just once it's boiled, you turn off the stove, you let the pot of soup sit there for a few weeks, well, it just goes bad, right? You
Yeah.
got to keep it warm. You got to keep the lead warm. Yeah.
Yeah. Well said.
Let's talk about so fractional sales C-suite playbook, right? What are the top tactics and strategies from the sales playbooks that you would typically go into a company with that you see would deliver pretty quick results, kind of like the low-hanging fruit stuff?
Well, for a sales playbook, it's so important to have one, so that the sales team have a roadmap or a guide that they can refer to. The mistake a lot of companies make is that they don't have a playbook. So if you have a sales team of, let's say, five sales reps, you have five different ways of doing things, right? Everyone is sort of figuring it out on their own. You have five different messaging. So it's very, very important to have a playbook, a custom sales playbook, designed that's really designed so that it's focused on your industry is really, really important. Having a playbook also ramps up your new sales hires during their onboarding, because I know I've experienced it myself. I get hired with a new company, and there's no playbook, there's no really training or guidance or roadmap, and you kind of have to figure it out on your own. So having that is essential. And what I typically do is I break the playbook in different sections. You've got sales methodology, you have sales process, activities, and that sort of thing. So number one, you want to make sure that you're putting your company overview right in there. Who's your competition? Competitor analysis. What's the differentiators that you're bringing in? What's your value proposition? Your ICP? All those sorts of things would go into the sales playbook, and you want to make sure also, very importantly, is what's your sales process. Joe mentioned pipeline, from lead to sale. How do you handle that? And I work with a I work with a security company at one point, and one of the owners called in a marketing company to get some leads. So they invested in SEO and Google Ads and that sort of thing. And because they had broken sales processes, the leads that were coming in fell into a black hole. So the owner really got frustrated because he wasn't seeing a return on investment. So when I was put into contact with him, and he's blaming marketing, the issue was, well, you have a broken sales process. You don't have any process in terms of how to handle the leads, how to follow up, and that sort of thing. So what I did is I instituted a playbook so that the 5 or 6 sales reps that he had were singing from the same playbook or songbook, as they say. And within just a few months, their win rates went up, and the owner saw a return on the investment. So very, very important to have a structured foundation, so everybody is consistent, and they're going to prospects and customers with the same messaging.
So as a fractional CMO, I love it when a sales guy says they were blaming marketing, but it was a sales problem. I love hearing that. Thank
Exactly.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And it happens more often than you would think.
Nice. So it sounds like pro tip number one to the playbook is step one, make sure you have a playbook. Joe, anything to add on that?
Yeah, I think Darren said it well. Have the playbook is primary, obviously, right? And you've got sort of your tenets, your core approach. But each growth area will be unique to each customer and each business. And Going back to what I mentioned before at the beginning of the call, just sort of my approach is looking at that lead to cash continuum and then looking at that journey along that way. That's where the playbook comes in to identify where the organization may need the most amount of attention to nurture and develop that growth. It could be closing techniques, it could be lead flow, it could be product knowledge. There could be a myriad of different areas. It could be new logo growth versus, retaining existing business. There's a whole host of areas where you can insert your value and insert your playbook to generate that growth. But obviously, that answer is quite unique to the company and the business. I think at a foundational level, much like Darren alluded to, my approach is there's really three major ethos that you want to take into a playbook. One, that vision must be crystal clear and unambiguous within the organization. It starts there internally. If internally you're not all aligned on the same vision, then externally the market will be confused. So having that crystal clear vision, very simple, is number one. Number two, investing in the people, right? The people run the business. As a fractional leader, we come in to effectively bring the growth to the next level. We're always working ourselves out of a job. That's the nature of it. So as a result of it, you must invest in the people that are there, and the organization needs to adopt that mindset to really invest in the people and grow them and develop them to ensure that they have the tenure and the employee retention that'll help drive the business to the next level. And I'd say thirdly is really be data driven, right? It's really incumbent upon the company and the business owner to really embrace and analyze the results, right? We can do so much and we can take it so far in terms of growth, but as we hand those keys over, it's really important that data is embraced to look at wins, losses, where the sources of revenue are, where they can improve and where they can continue to be informed on their business and leverage data to get them there.
Yeah, I think that's one of the best foundations for establishing sales and marketing alignment in an organization is everybody looks at data and the same set of data as well. And that way, nobody can have silly arguments about, pointing fingers or it's your fault or this isn't working. The data tells the story.
Yeah.
So I think it's really key to getting sales and marketing aligned around what's actually happening and listen to the story of what the data is telling us.
Well, it goes
Yeah,
back
you don't
to
want
the
to make
first one.
decisions on opinions.
No,
It's all about data.
Exactly, guys. And the numbers don't lie, right? And it goes back to the number one point too is, that data helps inform that crystal clear vision and make sure that there's no ambiguity and can really be the glue that binds, the marketing function, the finance function. Without data, you can really struggle to gain alignment in an organization.
Let's talk about Canadian businesses. And have you seen or do you have opinions around anything that's unique when it comes to scaling sales in a Canadian market, if a Canadian company versus non-Canadian companies, of course, US-based companies, or maybe Canadian companies who are exclusively selling and focused on the Canadian market? Any differences you've noticed or any kind of advice you would give to Canadian businesses who feel like they're kind of stuck at a certain sales plateau and not sure how to go beyond?
Yeah, I'm happy to kick that one off. In my experience with many Canadian businesses, certainly not all, is there can sometimes be a bit of a field of dreams concept. And if you've seen that movie, sort of the overarching line is if you build it, they will come. And that can sometimes be a crippling factor for Canadian businesses that I've worked with. They've got their idea, they've got this great business, but what they don't have is a commercial strategy and expecting people to find them and to buy their product and not going to market in an aggressive way to monetize their business is a phenomenon that I've encountered in this country. I always liken it to, 1 and 1A. Number one is your business idea, your product market fit, whatever that may be, your concept. 1A, closely secondary, is your commercial strategy, how you go about monetizing it. That approach is critical and is as important as your business idea. Otherwise, you will burn through your capital. Your runway of cash will dry up quickly. And it's surprising how quickly you can burn through cash if you don't have a tight, disciplined, rigorous commercial approach and strategy to monetizing your business. People will not find you. You have to be aggressive and go out there and develop that monetization approach.
But Joe, do you find that lack of product market fit is unique, particularly to Canadian businesses, or is that something that's kind of endemic in any business, especially the startup world?
It can be. It certainly can be. I think, just to be cautious of what I say about my fellow Canadians, I think that, business is not necessarily the same as it is here in the US. And I think in the US, there's a bit more of an aggressive, tenacious nature to that business. So it can happen on both sides of the border, absolutely. But I have found that to be more of the case in this country.
Canadian dreamers.
Well, and I think there's an opportunity there too, Robert, right? And I think especially with what's going on right now, there's an opportunity on a number of levels, right? There's a Buy Canadian movement, which can really help, right? Monetize and develop and grow Canadian business only, and organizations should look at marketing themselves according to that. I also think that with a weaker dollar, that can also breed opportunity to, conduct business if you can, right? If you've got a digital business south of the border as well to, reap the benefit of a stronger US dollar. I think there's opportunity each way you look at it when you've got a trade war like we've embarked upon today, or not. There's ways to sort of manipulate that to your advantage to help, the growth of your overall business.
Darren, how about you? Differences between Canadian US businesses from a sales lens?
Well, from my perspective and my experience, I can say that Canadians are a little bit more conservative. They take a little bit more time to make decisions overall, compared to my U.S. counterparts, or they may be, like Joe said, maybe a little bit more aggressive, a little bit quicker to make decisions, and that sort of thing. But I think overall, whether it's Canadian or a U.S. based company, you really have to look within, and see, what are we doing? How can we improve? And talk to your customers. I think the biggest mistake that companies make is that they just don't talk to their customers enough. You have to speak with your customers on a regular basis. You work hard to get them. So make sure that you're getting as much information as you can. See how you can improve, because your competition is calling on them, and they're calling on them on a daily basis. They're offering them promotions, discounts, and all that sort of thing. And the worst thing that can happen is that you lose a customer and you didn't see it coming. I would much rather be proactive, speak with my customers, and make sure that we're doing all we can to keep them, because retention is key, right? There's, like Joe said, there's a lot of different things going on right now. With tariffs and that sort of thing, and there's certain things that we can control and not control, and one thing that we can control is making sure that we take care of our customers, and make sure that we're providing an excellent service and product.
It's kind of like the hardest thing to do is get a new customer. The second hardest thing is to keep the new customer coming back. Joe, any tips, experience shares on how to, once we've worked so hard to get that new customer, how do we keep them with us? How do we get them to buy again, to buy more?
Yeah, great question, great topic, and Darren nailed it. That communication, that touch point with the client is crucial, right? You've got to do it. You can't take for granted that your clients are pleased or satisfied. You've got to give them attention and nurture them. For me, a lot of it starts at the very beginning, right, of that focus. I'm a big believer in job family focus. So if you've got an existing business, to really have either reps split their time or dedicate reps to focusing on that existing business, that's a great retention initiative within itself. That way, people don't get distracted by chasing new business. There's sort of you're removing any kind of blocker for your individual reps to really focus on that client in terms of nurturing them for eventual price increase if that's in your model, cross-sell opportunity, and then just keeping them in general, right? I mean, it's 3 to 5 times more expensive to go and get a new client from a client acquisition cost than it is to just keep one, right? And that baseline foundation of business is where you grow, and that's where you develop your business. It's more favorable from a client acquisition cost perspective, economy of scale, attractiveness, valuation of your organization, so on and so forth. So it really is imperative. So starts at focus, and then from there, Darren mentioned this earlier on in the conversation, incentives should be aligned, right? So you should have your incentives, your compensation structure aligned to retention of business. That really fosters the right mentality and right behavior for the individual rep. Being, tuned into that client journey, really focusing on where that client is in terms of onboarding, their availability for product support, customer support, having a dedicated person they can reach out to, and then being proactive with them, really kind of embracing their overall customer journey is extremely important as well. And that all leads toward retention of the client.
Where does the repeat customer fit into the sales pipeline? So sales pipeline, traditionally we think of leads, they convert to customers. Once they've converted to customers, do those customers stay in the same sales pipeline, or is there a separate kind of retention pipeline that's created in parallel to specifically get those customers to stay on, repeat buy, et cetera?
Yeah, I think it really depends on the organization, Robert, and ultimately at the model of the business. The way that I would view it, right, would be your existing business that you've already locked in. That is your contracts that you're, accounting for your annual recurring revenue or whatever your business revenue model may be. That's there. That's a component that you've got to focus on from a retention standpoint. Those same customers, ideally, may be customers that you can do cross sells and upsells to. And that's where you'd see a new product for an existing customer come into your pipeline. That's how I would measure growth, right? If you're looking at growth, there's really what it comes down to. There's 4 pillars of revenue growth. There's your net new logo, which is hunting your white space, your new business. And then the other 3 all go within your existing book of business. That's cross sell, upsell as 1, price increase as number 2, and retention as number 3. If you've got $100 million business and you've got a 200 basis point swing in your retention, that results in significantly less that you have to go and sell and pay new client acquisition costs to. So really focusing on the retention and shoring up your base of business and really focusing on keeping that ultimately enables you to grow. It's in a way that growth is through mitigating loss.
Darren, how do you see it?
Yeah, like Joe said, it really depends on the industry, the business. But from my perspective, I think number one, going back to the beginning, you want to make sure that your sales reps are in the right spot. So you've got account executives who are handling those types of things, or farmers. You want to make sure that they're in the right spot. You want to make sure that they have the tools and resources so that they know exactly who to contact and when. So if I'm an account executive, let's say I have 25 accounts that I'm responsible for. Do I have the resources and tools so that I can keep track of these things? So does my company have a CRM, and am I actually using the CRM efficiently according to the sales playbook? So I want to make sure that I visit these customers on a consistent basis. One thing that you can do is you can assign quotas to each account. I've found that pretty effective, so that you can see if one particular account is growing at 10% and another one is flat, another one is experiencing a decline versus the prior year. You can develop strategies depending on what kind of growth you're seeing. And the other thing that's very, very important is that you want to make sure that your account executives are getting the proper coaching and support. I've been on so many different ride-alongs where we get to an existing customer, and I ask the sales rep, okay, well, what's the strategy for this call? Oh, I'm just going to go in and say hi and see how things are going. And that's not a good strategy, right? If you want to if you want to upsell, cross sell, keep that customer, you want to make sure that every time you visit that customer, you're providing value, you're providing education, whatever it is. And I find that a lot of these sales reps just don't have any type of strategy or pre-call planning. So you want to make sure that you're providing that coaching, that feedback on a regular basis, so that when they do visit their customers, you're providing value. Because, like I said before, the competition, they're calling on your customers on a consistent basis, and if they're providing value and a promotion at the same time, you may get a rude awakening at some point.
Yeah, it's interesting. You talk about that sales rep who's in the field and they're just going to go and say hi. And it's not their fault because there's nobody who's put in place a strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And, we always come back to strategy in all these discussions. And strategy is not rocket science, right? It just makes sense to have a strategy before you start executing on something. And it just happens so often that's just for a variety of reasons. There's a lack of strategy. There's no strategy. There's an old strategy. There's a bad strategy. But at the end of the day, it's just keep focused on making sure that there is a strategy, make sure it's a good strategy, and don't be afraid to change it or refine it or iterate on it to keep it current and keep on improving.
Yeah, one thing we have to realize is that these sales reps are by themselves the vast majority of the time, and they're probably thinking, okay, I'm doing a pretty good job. The sales managers chained to their desk. They're not going out in the field enough. They're busy working on conference calls and reports and all that sort of thing. Sales managers, if you do have a sales manager, it's very, very important that you get out there and spend time in the field. And if there is no sales manager, if it's a founder, CEO, owner, they're probably not spending much time out in the field. They just don't have it. So it's very, very important that we provide that coaching and support to the sales reps, because going out to a customer just to say hi it's just not good enough.
No, it's not. I completely agree with that. I think what Darren mentioned there about being intentional, right? And either having a target or a quota assigned to that account, critically important. Depending on the client base, account plans, maybe, if they've got enterprise accounts, and if the client and the account numbers warrant an individualized account plan, that's always a great way to look at that roadmap for the year of what you intend to do with that client. It helps sort of set that strategy, Robert, that you mentioned there as well. If you've got high volume of accounts, then you can look at territory plans. But ultimately, what it comes down to is leveraging the intention and the strategic intent of why you have your clients, why you're visiting your clients, and what you need to do to grow and retain them. And I think that point that Darren made about the sales manager is really important as well. And even if it's a CEO founder, I mean, your clients are going to be the number one indicator for product development as well, right? Where you may need to augment or pivot or think about how you can keep your clients engaged through any kind of product enhancements. The voice of the customer is the most powerful catalyst to develop and improve and invest in your product. And no one is better suited to tell you that than the client. So if you're a CEO, a founder, or a manager, hearing that directly from the client is imperative, because that's the lifeblood of your business to continue to develop and evolve your business as well.
100%. Gentlemen, thank you so much for sharing so much wisdom today. I hope that anyone who's listening has made a few notes like I have, and has a few takeaways that they can go and get immediate value on. A lot of tactics we discussed, a lot of good stuff. So thank you so much to Joe and Darren. Tell everybody, where can they find you if they want to reach out to you?
Well, my name is Darren Legault again, fractional VP of Sales with Sales Acceleration. I'm based in Ottawa, but work across North America. I can be reached at 613-858-1838 or dlegault at salesacceleration.com.
Great. And Joe, how can people find you?
Yeah, Joe Randle, based in Toronto. Easy to find me. Phone number is 416-731-8116. I can also be emailed at jrandle, JRANDLE 07 @gmail.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn and direct message me through LinkedIn as well.
Right. LinkedIn's probably the easiest way. Everybody's on LinkedIn these days. Go search on Joe Randle, Darren Legault, and connect. All right, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on the Fractional Pros Canada podcast.
Thank you, Robert.
guys.
Thank you, Joe.
It's a pleasure.
That's a wrap on another episode of the Fractional Pros Canada podcast. If you're a fractional professional based in Canada, we'd love to have you join us in the Fractional Pros Canada Facebook group, the home for Canada's fractional community. It's where Canadian fractional executives connect, share insights, and help each other succeed. Until next time, I'm Robert Mendelson, Fractional CMO. May your impact be full-time, even if your hours are fractional.